Rain didn't fall. It hissed a sheet of needles combing the lot, and the cracked neon like a barber with a mean streak. Murphy's diner hunched into the weather, windows glazed with grease and stubborn hope. The bell over the door coughing whenever wind put a shoulder to it. The flat top popped. Coffee smelled like burned luck. Bleach ghosted the air from last night's mop. Sharp as a dare, at the dish pit, Darius worked the rhythm that kept the world from shaking loose. Stack, spray, scrub, rinse, rack. He'd rolled his sleeves. Hot water had already pruned his fingers and nicked his wrists white. The wall clock above him had died 2 months ago. Hands stuck at 6:12 like a punchline. Nobody laughed at. He was 3 days into saving for a real dinner sit down as a customer, not a shadow at the sink. He'd said it in his head the way some people say grace. Kid, Big Mike grunted from the pass, forearms the color and texture of cast iron. Order up. On the ledge waited a burger bleeding daylight, and a heap of fries wearing steam like thin banners. Darius's stomach folded around the smell and stayed quiet out of pride. He set 2 plates to dry, wiped his hands on an apron that had forgotten its original color, and glanced toward the back corner. Table 6. Table 6 had the wrong weather. An elderly couple sat in rain-dark clothes, drip circles widening beneath their shoes. The man's suit hung on him like it was trying to remember its lines. The body inside kept posture anyway. Blue eyes under shade, a color that made you think of winter roads. The woman's hair lay in wet ropes against a coat a little too nice for this room. She kept opening and closing a leather portfolio, like something might grow in it if darkness cooperated. Sandy ghosted by with coffee, ponytails strict, sarcasm looser. Hour into 2 mugs, she said under her breath. No wallet. Mike won't comp. Policy's policy. Policy was the dinosaur that outlived the meteor. Darius knew the warmth a room makes when dignity has to crawl. He lifted the plate. Grease printed his palm with a temporary map. He walked past the counter where regulars hunched over eggs like confessions, past the jukebox that didn't take quarters anymore but blinked anyway. The floor squeaked more hope than water in last night's mop. He set the tray down at 6 before his nerve could argue. Excuse me, he said. This one's mine. The woman blinked fast, rain beating her lashes like new punctuation. Oh, sweetheart. Please, he said, sliding into the booth, splitting the distance so nobody had to reach across it. I can't finish these fries alone. The man studied him, not a glare, an audit. You worked for that, he said, voice ironed, gravel left in the pleats. So did you, Darius said. Just not today. He flagged Sandy. Fresh coffee, please. And, the kitchen phone. Can we get Pete's garage? Tow from the interstate. Sandy's notepad flipped. The pencil made neat railroads of graphite. Big Mike watched from the pass, jaw grinding, then turned back to the grill with theatrical boredom. Policy sighed and checked the weather. The woman's fingers shook around the cup when it came. Darius pretended not to see, folded a napkin into a little tent, and propped it under the plate like a trivet. Anything for his hands to do. Darius, he said. Darius Johnson. Harold, the man said, and the name fit him like something engraved. My wife, Margaret. Nice to meet you, Darius said, and meant more than the words were built to carry. The portfolio's latch sagged. Copper flashed a seal, embossed with 2 elegant curves, crossing like careful signatures. Beneath, thick paper with a blueprint edge, a notary stamp catching neon and throwing it back, then closed again. Tidy. How far do you walk? he asked. Because small talk is architecture, an extra beam under a ceiling that might fall. 2 miles from the interstate, Harold said. He said it like a fact, refusing to be complaint. Sandy reappeared. Phone at the back's dead, she said. But I got Pete. 20 minutes. Thank you. Margaret breathed. The words steamed the rim. They ate like people who'd forgotten how to be watched. Darius kept the burger in the middle and made slow work of the extra fries, stealing only when Margaret insisted. He recognized the oldest trick she had, making generosity feel like a favor to her. Miss Ruby did that too. On days the oxygen hissed, and she needed to borrow his pride, so his didn't break. School? Harold asked. Casual, which meant not Roosevelt. Senior. Plans. He let the word sit, like future might hear its name and come. Maybe business, he said. For our side of town, something useful. Useful sounds expensive, Margaret said, and there wasn't judgment in it, just math. Wind bullied the bell. It clacked like loose teeth. Big Mike plated a chicken fried steak without looking. The room settled back into a manageable hum. Forks. Low voices. Ventilation singing its tired white note. Headlights slashed the windows. Pete's toe shook rain off the lot and idled like a tired animal finding straw. Pete shouldered in. Mustak dam, jacket smelling like outside. Which one of you called? He asked. Then saw the couple, clocked the suit, recalibrated. Out front, Harold said, standing. When he rose, something reassembled. Shoulders squared to a shape that suggested rooms where people wait to be called in. He pulled a leather case from his inner pocket, thumbed it, then didn't open it. Took a napkin instead. Wrote a careful line with a pen that clicked like a trigger. Your address? He asked Darius. Odd question. Darius gave it anyway. 1427 Elm. Harold folded the napkin into his chest pocket like an oath. He set money down for Pete, more than a jump deserved. Bills, a line. Money that had not existed 20 minutes ago. Margaret saw Darius see it. A flush climbed her cheekbones. When you don't have something, she said softly, you learn to carry other things in its place. Like manners, Sandy said, leaning her hip into the booth with a grin that let everybody off the hook. And Chili. Chili spends anywhere. Chili's a promise, Big Mike called, and then coughed like the human got loose. They moved toward the door. Rain had eased to a sting. In reflection, the man's profile snagged something in Darius's head. A picture on a lobby wall he'd wiped, but never lingered on. At the threshold, Harold turned. You gave what you didn't have to, he said. Not praise record. My grandmother says kindness multiplies, Darius said, and the line sounded like a poster when it left his mouth. Your grandmother is right, Margaret said, touching his arm with fingers light as receipts. The bell jangled. Cold slipped in and out after them. The toe's orange beacon blinked through rain, then went small. Sandy slid into the booth opposite with a twin burger and a wedge of pie that shone like lacquer. For the record, she said, I only do free when it's earned. I can't. You can, she said, tapping his knuckles with a fork handle. Respect, not charity. Don't make me turn this into a moment. He laughed because she made him. The sound startled him. It had new edges. He ate. The burger was lukewarm and perfect. The pie tasted like apples that had done time and come out sweet for it. Big Mike pretended to wipe the past too much. You see his wallet? Sandy asked low. Paid Pete like he printed the bills. Maybe it was in the car. Maybe, Darius said, and let the word do nothing. He finished, washed up, scraped plates, stacked, rinsed. Night pressed its face to the glass. When his shift ended, he tied on a thrift store jacket and stepped into a mist that lives in streetlight like ghosts deciding whether to commit. The walk home stitched through neighborhoods with different stories, porches still wearing Christmas lights in March, a corner store with bars painted to look less like bars, a bus sign bent at the exact angle of tired. His shoes drank through, cold found his ankles, and made a home at Elm. The house tilted into view, paint the color of newsprint, steps sagging. Oxygen hummed behind the window. Inside, Miss Ruby pretended to sleep the way people do when they want you to talk anyway. He kissed her forehead and smelled lotion. He unplugged the space heater and plugged it back in to trick it into working better. He told her about table 6, about rain, about a copper seal that flashed like a coin from another country. She opened one eye and smiled with the corner of her mouth. Approval on layaway. In his room, the alarm blinked 12:00. With a persistence that felt like faith, the ceiling crack feathered like an aneurysm across plaster. He lay down and saw blue eyes tally him, a napkin slide into a pocket, a portfolio unclench like a small mouth. His phone buzzed. "Jerome, you really gave away your dinner. You're insane." Darius. Maybe. Felt right. 3 dots that never became words. He set the phone face down, listened to the house breathe, counted 5 between Miss Ruby's inhales, because 5 meant safe. Sleep came like a mule, reluctant, stubborn, then suddenly all in. Somewhere across town, a gold watch ticked in sync with a wall clock. Somewhere, a portfolio's latch clicked. Somewhere, his name, Darius Johnson, was written a second time, careful as surgery. The rain thinned to nothing. The fridge kicked on. The neighborhood exhaled. He dreamed he was carrying a tray through a door that kept moving away, until, without warning, it moved toward him. He didn't drop the plate. He woke before it crashed, heart in his throat, coffee and grease still on his tongue, the word "why" nailed bright in his mind. At dawn, the bell over Murphy's coughed, in an empty room, and on Darius's stoop, an envelope softened from the night air waited under a wet flyer. Inside, a crisp photocopy of that copper seal. The twin curves crossed like signatures. No knot, no threat, just paper saying, "I see you." Without explaining how, he looked up and down the quiet street, felt the house breathing behind him, and understood the test had started in a place that pretended nothing ever happened. The mall squatted at the edge of town like a stranded ship, anchor lines cut, stores gutted, pigeons in uniform possession of the skylights. Sun hit the roof and came through dirty glass in tired ropes. Heat pulled up the old pretzel smell from tile grout and baked last decade's mop water into something like history. 15 acres, Harold said, boot heel pinging a penny that rolled and vanished in a crack. He didn't raise his voice. The emptiness raised it for him. Utilities intact. Transit kisses the curb. Bones are good. His watch ticked in his palm, face up, as if time needed to be supervised. Margaret flipped open the leather portfolio and made order out of void tabs, like little flags, paper that had weight, even before it became a decision. Darius set his hand on the dead fountain, fingers on cold concrete that remembered water. What goes where? Clinic takes east, Margaret said, pencil moving. The graphite sound soft and convinced. Morning light lands clean for intake. Exam rooms here. Here. Pharmacy on the corner. First thing you hit from the bus. Harold's finger cut a line down the long corridor, where an arcade sulked behind a grate. Job training. Computer lab there. Culinary in the old pretzel stall. You can still smell the salt. Auto bay out by the loading dock. Plenty of exhaust clearance. Once we punch a louver. Darius kept his palm on the fountain's rim and looked up through the skylight scarred with tape. Pigeons shifted. Claws rasping glass. Library, he said. Quiet rooms. A door nobody has to knock twice. Margaret nodded before the word finished, leaving his mouth. Advisory room with glass walls, she said, drawing a rectangle with a smaller square nested inside it. So governance isn't rumor. Seats for anyone who thinks they should be there. Mics that work. Minutes on paper. Glass, he asked. So people can see themselves in charge, Harold said. Panic gets lazy when it's visible. They walked. Their footsteps came back at them with a beat that made empty sound like a drum line. Halfway down, the smell of popcorn got it together for a second and then failed. A menu board clung to a wall. Combo. One smiling like it knew the joke and was tired of it. Donors will want their names big, Margaret said. Pencil active, not unkind. Politicians will want ribbon and song. Vendors won't want to move. Someone will say it's too much for this side of town. We publish rents, Darius said. He slid his fingers along a dusty grill and left 5 clean stripes. Post wages, grievance number goes where it can't be ignored. And we don't mount a crown. That line costs room, Harold said, checking the watch. A small tell he probably didn't know he had. Then we pick other rooms, Darius said. Partners don't need plaques to hear each other. They stopped under a skylight cracked in one corner. Tape made a white scab that did nothing. Wind nosed through the seams, metallic and cool. What truth do we hang on the fence? Harold asked. If the screen is dark, Darius said, watching dust float like tire snow. People ask us why. Margaret wrote the sentence at the top of a page in block letters and underlined why twice. She drew a small box beside it. Like a promise, she was daring the future to keep it. They turned into the food court. Gum ghosts freckled the floor. A pigeon hopped on one leg like a bouncer having a day off. The kiosk, where pretzels had died, waited with its steel asleep. This irritates people, Margaret said, shutting the portfolio as if closing a door softly. We should begin as we mean to go. Board, bylaws, auditors that bore us. Staff paid enough not to drift. Paid apprentices from day one, Darius said. His shoes stuck and unstuck with damp kisses. No mop would forgive. People can't learn hungry. We teach in the open. We post failures like we post wins. Harold's mouth tilted, not quite a smile. Wash dishes. Learn governance, he said. It's all timing, temperature, and who gets burned if. In the corridor to the loading dock, heat lay in a slant. Engine warm. Oil, sweetening dust. Out back, weeds had taken the asphalt in geometric patience. Chain link rattled in a private wind. We'll need permits fast, Margaret said. Licensure, wage standards, vendor relocations with dates that don't slither. City wants everything yesterday, and exactly so. Everything yesterday is our native language, Harold said. Exactly so is the accent. Darius put 2 fingers through the fence diamonds. Metal hummed faint with the highway's echo. He pictured a whiteboard in a lobby that didn't exist yet. Numbers in a font your aunt could read without squinting. He pictured a kid translating minutes to calm for a grandmother. We name rooms for what they do, he said, turning back. Clinic because it heals. Lab because it teaches. Advisory because it listens. No saints. No carved gratitude. Understood, Margaret said. Agreement had its own quiet when it was real. They cut back through the atrium. 2 teens had appeared in the shadow of a boarded boutique, hoodies up. Boredom, well practiced over curiosity that kept poking through anyway. Darius stopped 6 feet away and nodded toward the pretzel stall. We'll need hands when the grease traps come up, he said. Apprenticeship meeting Saturday at 9. Pay starts day 1. No promises except sweat and a clean shirt. The taller kid's mouth twitched. The other kept eyes on the floor like it might tell him a secret if he didn't spook it. Maybe, the tall one said. Maybe is the first yes, Darius said. He didn't push. Offers rot when smothered. They kept walking. A security shutter hummed when Harold brushed it. Metal remembered touch longer than skin does. A defunct carousel sat under a tarp like a sleeping animal. Nobody wanted to wake first. Noise policy, Margaret said. Pencil tapping. Quiet hours. Meter wear. By the door, Darius said. So people see us measuring the thing that ruins sleep. City will ask who runs the numbers. Harold said. Boring people. Darius said. That's the point. From the east wall, he eyed the way light slid, marking time more honestly than any clock. Pharmacy window wants a sight line to the bus stop. We keep batch numbers and temps pinned no matter who asks. Margaret's pencil paused, then nodded. Batch numbers on the board. She said, call the font big enough. We'll fight over kerning later. Darius hooked a finger at a dead storefront's glass and caught his reflection. A thin boy with a jaw that had earned itself. The glass wobbled when he breathed. He thought of people breathing, waiting, timing their day by a number on a screen that had the decency not to lie. Back near the entrance, they faced the vast, hollow rectangle of the main atrium. Harold stood with his hands behind his back and saw something only people who like blueprints see: load paths, exit routes, where panic would go if it had a choice. What truth do we tell donors? Harold asked. That we're allergic to crowns, Darius said, and politicians, that they can cut ribbons if they cut checks. Darius said, then they can stand in the back. Margaret didn't look up, but the pencil smiled. They stepped outside into heat thick enough to slow verbs. Tar woke up. Chewing gum thawed to soft. A city bus knelt for a woman and waited. The sound filed itself in Darius's head. Under possible. Subfolder. Real. On the drive back, Harold didn't touch the radio. Margaret irritated two people efficiently and left one smiling without knowing why. Darius let grit salt his teeth and held the sentence they'd just written on paper under his tongue like medicine. We show them numbers, not a story, he said to the window. Margaret watched the world in the side mirror. We give them a story in the numbers, she said. It's the same thing, told from a different sidewalk. They turned onto a block with goals made of milk crates and kids who didn't need a whistle to know when to stop. A woman fanned herself with a folded church bulletin, Herald Park, engine heat ticking down like a cooling argument. You don't owe us, yes, Harold said, hand briefly resting on the watch, as if time could be polite. You owe yourself truth. Darius looked up at a second-floor window held shut with tape. He thought about unpeeling it and getting yelled at for causing a draft. He thought about someone counting pills like beads because a bus was late twice. He thought of a screen that would stay lit when the day went wrong. I'll need rules, he said, and glass, and a wall where napkins stick. You'll get irritation, Margaret said. I live there, he said. They climbed the stoop. Inside, a hallway admitted to having seen better paint. The air smelled like gain and loss in equal parts. Darius washed his hands until the cold turned them pink and practiced the line into the mirror that wobbled if you breathed too hard. If the screen is dark, ask us why. He tried it softer. Like we're open. He liked that better. They spread the portfolio open on a kitchen table that leaned a degree too far left. Margaret set tabs in a row like a train finding its schedule. Harold placed the watch between them. Its second-hand carving, truth small and steady, permits, Margaret said, sliding forms, provisional licensure, advisory board list, community seats. For the first meeting, Harold said, chairs that don't wobble and a mic that doesn't squeal. People forgive plans. They don't forgive sound. Darius pulled a corkboard off a nail, bent tack still stuck in one corner, and laid it flat. He wrote the sentence again in block letters, underlined Y. then pinned the paper to the board with the bent tack anyway. It hung crooked, human. He looked at it the way you look at a map before a long road. The part that's easy enough to point at, and the part that won't show up on paper. The day had put grit under his nails and purpose in his jaw. He felt tired in a way that meant something would be there to show for it later. Across town, the mall waited like a patient animal, all ribs and shadow, ready to take a name that wasn't for sale. In the evening's thin light, pigeons settled and forgot to make noise. Somewhere, a bus sighed and left, and nobody had to run for it. Saturday at 9, Darius said, seeing the pretzel stall, the kids in hoodies, the way maybe becomes yes when you give it a time. We start pulling grease traps and posting wages, Margaret said, and finding the line where quiet lives, Harold added, tapping the watch, and pinning it to the wall. They didn't say good luck. They wrote it down. They made a box to check later, and the bones of the thing they were building, steel and rule and glass, felt, just for a second, like they had already learned to carry light. City Hall smelled like floor wax and softened paper, the kind of pages that have been handled by worry. Fluorescence hummed with the persistence of a bad habit. A wall clock clicked loud enough to count nerves. Darius climbed the last 3 stairs, because the elevator was 2 minutes slow, and the chair at the dais was already clearing his throat. Harold set his pocket watch on the table, as if time needed supervision. Margaret unlatched the leather portfolio and fanned tabs like flags, a geography of process. Darius slid one sheet to the top, a header in clean block letters, a sentence underlined twice. If the screen is dark, ask us why. The chamber filled with the city's usual cross-section teachers, still tasting coffee. A barber in his wedding jacket. A blogger with a phone raised like a scalpel. An auntie in church shoes, who knew where every microphone lived. Coats, steamed rain. The room warmed by degrees. Next item, the chair said, reading from paper that had learned to behave, Riverside Redevelopment Application and Charter for Public Oversight. The clerk paperclip bracelet, eyes like a file drawer that shut clean-stacked manila folders at the dais. The city attorney sat to one side in gray on gray. Voice, the color of manila even before he used it. A council member with a promising grin kept testing it, as if it might crack. Harold spoke without standing. Boards are bones, he said, fingertip on the watch glass. They carry weight or they don't. Margaret slid the charter under the document camera. The ceiling monitor threw text into cold light. No covert assessment of residents or applicants, all vetting conducted with notice, consent, and records available on request. Quarterly independent audits selected by the city. Contracts above $5,000 posted publicly by vendor and rate. Grievance line answered by the public library. Minutes archived there. Donor recognition limited to reports. No naming rights, no crowns. A murmur rippled. The auntie lifted a hand and didn't wait to be called. When rules crack, she said, voice low and shaped like Sunday. You patch in daylight or wallpaper, we post the crack, Darius said. He lifted a foam core mock of the lobby, a cheap flat screen, a dry erase board, a small brass plate under glass. He tapped the plate with one knuckle. If the screen is dark, you ask us why. If the whiteboard lies, you get to erase it while we watch. A teacher in the back laughed once, grateful for the joke and the permission. The chair didn't laugh. Selection process for your director. Local board majority. Margaret said, seat for the library, seat for labor, seat for a neighborhood clinic. Budget veto lives with the city. If our foundation meddles, lock us out. The council member with the grin leaned into his mic. You expect us to believe a teenager can run numbers like these? I expect you to pick an auditor that bores you, Dario said, and to fire me if the numbers don't match. Hums shifted. The blogger's phone found a better angle. The barber tipped his chin with pride. He pretended not to own. Quiet hours, the chair asked, looking up from the page. You put decibels in a charter. We live next to crib, sleep, and shift work. Harold said, noise is health. Meter goes by the front door. We write the readings where gossip can't improve them. The city attorney cleared his throat, the sound of a stapler closing. For the record, he said, this charter grants full inspection rights to the city, quarterly audits, as stated, public posting of all vendor agreements, and a grievance process outside the board's control. Record reflects, the clerk said, already aligning copies for the scanner in the side alcove. The machine breathed pages and spat them, stamped and inevitable. Public comment opened like a door that creaked but didn't stick. A nurse stepped up and spoke about parents timing fevers by bus schedules. A grocer talked, rents that slide when no one's watching. A teenager with chewed sleeves asked if paid apprenticeship meant not volunteer with a fancier name. The auntie circled back to ask who answers the phone after 9. The library, the clerk said, without a smile. We do. A hand rose from the back, same council member, smile in place. Is this transparency or theater? He asked, because we've all seen dashboards that blink and don't mean a thing. Darius lifted his page again, simple as bread. If the screen is dark, ask us why, he said. If it's bright, ask us what we missed. Cute, someone muttered. Cute is chilly. A voice called from the gallery, Sandy, jacket damp, carrying a to-go bag for someone's shift. Laughter loosened something tight. The chair rapped once. Order. A blogger in a thrifted blazer tried a jab. Isn't this poverty cosplay for donors? Take a picture of a noble line and shake a tin. No crown, Margaret said without looking up. We will not wear them, and we will not mount them. It's in the document you're photographing instead of reading. The clerk walked the stamped copy to the corkboard in the hallway and pinned it with 2 firm taps. Through the chamber's glass, people watched the paper become a public fact. You could feel the room tilt toward belief the way a plant leans toward a window. The chair called the question. Green lit up the board like relief. Motion pass, he said. Gavel finding wood with the sound of a decent door closing. Provisional approval. Subject to licensing and the usual misery. Harold closed his watch with a small click. Margaret squared the packet corners, as if neatness were a talisman. Darius folded the foam core against his chest and felt how light a promise is before it has to carry anything. In the hallway, air conditioners complained and flyers curled at the edges. A reporter intercepted them with a mic. You led with an apology, she said to Darius. Why put your throat out first? So you see where to put the knife if I lie later, he said. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The council member drifted close enough that aftershave and calculation were the same smell. Levers move thing, he said quietly. Play nice and the machine won't notice you. Play hero, and it will. Darius read the blue vein near the man's temple ticking out a second speech. Not a threat, a hobbit. He nodded once because nodding sometimes makes people confess later. We'll play honest, he said. Honest is a kind of theater, the council member said, and left before anyone could choose a better line for him. They stepped into rain thin enough to be theatrical. Umbrellas opened like apologies. The barber clapped Darius's shoulder once. Quick. The nurse gave him a look that meant, all right. Then do it. The auntie passed without speaking, and then turned halfway down the steps. Don't let them make you a story, she said. Make them keep the numbers. Ma'am, he said. That was the whole oath. They ate sandwiches on the back steps because hunger wins jurisdiction. Margaret called licensing, and irritated exactly the right person. Harold worked the watch lid the way some men roll coins habit, saying, "We're still keeping time." Darius sat under the eave with the foam core board across his knees and watched rain bead on the plastic sleeve the clerk had taped over the mock dashboard to protect it from fingerprints and weather. Through the glass, he could see the corkboard with its fresh pin. The sentence he'd written looked smaller at a distance. That felt correct. Promises ought to shrink when you stand back. The work should loom. He pictured the lobby that would hold the real screen. He could hear the cheap fan in the ceiling that would click on humid days. He could see a kid reading triage. 06. And knowing that meant 20 minutes and not forever. He could see a grandmother pausing at the brass plate on her way out and smiling, a private joke with the building that had remembered her. Inside again, they found the licensing forms waiting like a patient enemy. Hands-free sinks, sharps disposal, panic fonts. Margaret read off. Ventilation specs for the auto bay, vendor relocation terms, wage posting. Panic fonts, Sandy said, eyebrows up, legible at 30 feet for someone who just dropped their heart. Margaret said. Sandy nodded, suitably chastened by typography. They divided the list. The librarian, who had materialized with a thermos and a stack of sticky notes, claimed the grievance flow like a prize. Phones ring, she said. We will answer. The blogger wandered in, contrite. I read it, he said, sheepish. The charter. It's boring. Good. Harold said, boredom is hard. By late afternoon, the chamber had emptied to janitors, coaxing trash bags off overfull mouths, and the security guard whose shift taught him people at their smallest. The clerk pressed 2 extra pins into the corkboard for no reason that would register in a report, and tidied the bottom edge of the posted page with a thumbnail. On the walkout, Darius paused at the glass again. Rain smeared city lights into ribbons. The sentence under the header had already picked up fingerprint smudges that made the black ink look warm. He pressed his palm to the glass on his side, felt the cool, watched it fog and clear, paper that breathes, he said, almost to himself. Margaret heard, because she heard most things. Then keep reminding it, she said. Screens blink. We answer. They crossed the street between puddles. A bus knelt for a woman with too many bags, and waited long enough to be kind. No horns. Somewhere, a bell rang in a doorway that didn't know it was part of a scene. Harold pocketed the watch, then brought it out again as if the time might have changed while he wasn't looking. Lunch went to dinner, he said. Tomorrow we pour process. Darius laughed. Soft. Pour it where it will set. On the numbers, Margaret said, already texting a plumber, an electrician, a vendor with a conscience, and a calendar. They reached the corner. The rain gave up. The street exhaled. In an upstairs window, someone pulled tape off a pane and let it snap back against their wrist. It made a sound like a decision. They turned toward work that hadn't yet learned all the ways it could fail. Behind them, in the cooled-down chamber, the posted page hung with the weight of words that had been said out loud and recorded. The kind of weight paper gets when it stops pretending to be theory. If the screen is dark, ask us why. The sentence would outlive this hour. The hour would test the sentence, and somewhere between a corkboard and a lobby that hadn't been built, a city took one quiet breath. It didn't have to borrow. They poured before sunrise, because concrete listens only to chemistry and cold. Sodium lamps washed the site in a fake dawn. Breath hung in small ghosts. Hard hats, beating with dew. The pump truck reversed in with patient beeps. Boom, unfolding like a metal spine. Hose, shivering before it coughed gray muscle onto steel. Hold it, The inspector called from grid SE12, crouched, so her clipboard and boots lived on the same plane. Chairs are low. The foreman muttered in a language that made room for hand signals. Darius stepped into the chalked square. Knelt, pressed his thumb to the rebar cradle, too low by a finger, exactly like she said. He looked up. Kill the pump. Silence arrived, heavy and expensive. The hose twitched, settling. Crew shifted weight. Somewhere, a gull laughed like a heckler. We reset, Darius said, and nobody argued, because a slab only forgives once. They jacked the chairs, lifted the mesh back into future. The inspector watched without spite or praise, a metronome in boots, a nod. The pump thumped awake. The hose began to feed the grid again, obedient as penitent rain. Inside the skeleton, ductwork, unfurled, galvanized ribs, taking shape over rooms that had only been on paper yesterday. The air smelled like cut pine and diesel, like coffee that had surrendered heat but not permission. Songless radios murmured. A carpenter ran a thumb along a door mortise until his nail found proud grain. He sanded it with a tenderness he'd deny on a bet. In a trailer warmed by a space heater with opinions, the whiteboard acquired a spine, critical path, in fat block letters, and beneath, names in the cramped cursive of men who can deadlift drywall but treat pens like small animals. Beside it, a cheap monitor blinked test numbers. Below the screen, a laminated card was blue-taped at eye level. If the screen is dark, ask us why. Sharpie bled a little at the edges. The bleed made the line look older than everything else in the trailer. Across the street, the vendor pavilion rattled awake. Ms. King rolled her grate with a rattle and a curse that sounded fond. The key grinder's motor spooled up, a bright whine that said metal had decided to behave. She hung a hand-lettered sign under a hook. Apprentice discount. Show your hands. A teen shuffled over. Borrowed tool belt, riding low. He held out palms. Half-moons of grease wore his nail beds like medals. Congratulations, Ms. King said, deadpan. You're tired. 10%. Dark humor loosened shoulders across 3 trades, out back. The auto bay framed itself into a rectangle facing the loading dock. Miguel stood with a breaker bar and the patience of a Sunday teacher. Feel the give, he told a kid, palm to knuckles. Threads talk. They tell you when to stop. People, too. The culinary box, the old pretzel stall bleached to stainless, argued with a soffit that swore it was not load-bearing, then remembered its birth certificate. A hood installer, neck tattoo peeking like a witness, looked at Darius. Numbers don't care we're late, he said. Join the club, Darius said, and meant both of them. By mid-morning, light shouldered through the east opening, laying a clean stripe across taped subfloor. Margaret stepped through dust motes with a folder and a coffee that had gone past usefulness and into identity. Noise policy, she said. No hello, quiet hours 11 to 7. Meter wants a home. By the door, Darius said. So we measure the thing that ruins sleep, where everyone can see it. She handed over a decibel reader, the kind of cheap, honest device that resents drama. He mounted it at eye level with 2 short screws. It yawned awake and blinked 49. The number looked like a mood. Manageable. Glazer tried to slide a change order. Margaret added, flipping a tab. Price creep by rounding error. We're rebidding. Lose 4 days. Steal back 2. Darius uncapped a marker at the whiteboard and wrote in neat caps. Failure log. Caught late change order. Rebid. Countermeasures. Second reader review on all COs. A box around it. Space left for a checkmark he hoped belonged to someone else later. Shame turns into policy. when written where strangers can point. At noon, the inspector reappeared, chin tucked in her scarf, eyes amused by nothing, hands-free sinks. She said, reading from the licensure checklist. 8 seconds to hot, sharps labeled, panic fonts, visible from 30 feet, exits that point towards sense. They walked the framed clinic with a stopwatch and tape, water met heat as 6 Mississippi. Red stickers went on straight. Exit arrows refused self-pity and pointed toward the big outside. She checked boxes like raindrops, no roofs. Provisional pending, she said. Don't break anything you just fixed. Working on it, Darius said. Don't, she said, but her mouth warmed a degree. The boom truck squealed off, with wet chute sliding through its own puddle. Big Mike arrived with a warming tray like a peace treaty. Steam, losing arguments to air. Midwest Mill, he announced to no one and everyone. Hot at the end of the table for sinners. Sandy followed with spoons and paper bowls, moving like someone who has learned to pour comfort without spilling power. Eat, she told Darius, pressing a spoon into his palm. This building likes to hear spoon. They sat on a stack of drywall and ate between temporary walls. The inspector tried a bowl, wrote something on her clipboard that might have been edible. For 10 minutes, the soundtrack was spoon on fiber, breath, and the far complaint of a generator insisting reality. After, a barber used a spirit level to coax a mirror in the vendor row. The bubble split the world exactly. If I cut a crooked head, that's on me, he said. If a mirror lies, that's on you. Darius tweaked the bracket by a hair. The bubble slid to true like a breath, finding lungs. Your head straight, he said. The room can behave. Afternoon learned to lower its voice. Rosa taped down a childcare roster with tape that fought and lost. The meter read 52, then settled at 50. A baby on a stoop across the street napped on a chest that rose like a remedy you can afford. Ms. King snapped a fresh blank into the grinder and let brass sing. Miguel showed how to bleed a radiator without bleeding a thumb. The board convened in the glass room, which still smelled like caulk and decisions. Chairs scraped. The librarian took minutes in ink that never blotted. Grievance line forwards to us, she said. We answer, we call back. We don't explain on social for sport. Rent schedule pinned in the lobby. Margaret added, stair-step increases printed large enough to shame. Noise Complain Appartement 3B. The librarian said, reviewing her notes. Midnight bass from a truck. We notch bass. Buy 2 white noise machines, Darius said. Apologize in person. The foreman leaned in the doorway, hat in hand, already told the crew. Radio drops below talk right of 11. Put it on the board so they can hate the ink instead of me. On it, Darius said. Writing. Noise spill 00. Dos apologized. Bass notched. Machines delivered tres cuatro. He boxed it and left 3 empty check squares for follow-ups. The empties were the point. They promised annoyance until resolved. Back in the trailer, he stared at a taped print of the mock dashboard. Triage wait min, jobs placed, vendor moves, grievances. Open resolved, and touched the plastic with a knuckle. He could feel the day when the plastic would be glass, then fingerprints wipe, a rhythm like a heart. Donor wants their name on the lobby, Margaret said from the doorway. Tough money. No, Darius said, without heat. She knows, Margaret said, testing tone. She'll fund anyway. Crown clause is a relief to the kind who still believe in church. He smiled. Small. They're our favorite heretics. Evening flattened the sky into the kind of blue that makes everything look temporary. Lights came alive inside the skeleton without ceremony. The poor sat with quiet arrogance. The crew drifted off in clumps that read as families, even if they weren't. Darius walked the perimeter with the decibel meter like a priest with a relic. 49 at the bus stop corner where the city sighed. 51 by the auto bay. 47 against the chain link where weeds threaded geometry out of neglect. He stopped where the fence met the sidewalk and read the napkins. People had begun to tape there. Shaky scrawl on grocery store squares. Thank you for the quiet. My cousin needs a job. Don't make the chili weak. If the screen is dark, he flattened a corner, lifting in the wind with his thumb until heat took it. Crooked remained. He let it. Crooked meant people, and people meant durable. His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Licensing walkthrough Friday. Bring the box. Another from Jerome, who had been wiring a closet to the edge of code, and then pulling it back. Your handwriting looks like a rushed doctor. Take this as shade. He pictured Jerome grinning into his collar. He answered one with a thumbs up, the other with a picture of the decibel meter reading 48, and the caption glamour shot. The building hummed around him like a big animal remembering how to breathe without thinking about it. In the lobby frame, studs made grids of air. He stood under the blank bracket where a real screen would live. Dust settled in the beam of a contractor, light like slow confetti. He wiped the blue-taped card with the side of his hand until the words shone again. If the screen is dark, ask us why. The inspector's boots clicked once more on concrete as she passed, headed for her car. You put the question in brass, she asked, chin tilting toward the card. Soon, Darius said, for now it's Sharpie. Sharpie gets read, she said, and left the compliment there for him to pretend he didn't need. He locked the trailer. The space heater sighed off. The fan above the future intake desk clicked 3 times, decided to wait for real wiring. Across the street, someone lit a grill. Smoke moved like memory past the chain link, carrying salt and char and payday. On his way out, he flicked the decibel meter off and on again to watch it wake. The number blinked 3 times, settled on 46. The 4 and the 6 held a quiet compromise between city and promise. He walked to the gate, key biting his palm, and looked back. Ducks shone. Chalk lines read as sentences. The poured slab kept its own counsel. In the glass room, the dry erase ghosts of erased words lingered like the afterimage of a good idea that got written, tested, and moved into policy. He touched the blue card one last time. It flexed and held. The night caught its reflection and wore the sentence backward. Ask us why. He could hear, in a place beneath hearing, the building, learning its heartbeat. The boring kind that means you're alive. He let the gate clang, not loud, just true. And the sight, for the first time, felt less like a plan and more like a room someone had decided to inhabit. The audit room had the decor of a reprimand, gray carpet, the color of unslept hours, fluorescents that hummed like gnats, a sweating pitcher, 2 paper cups daring you to trust them. A dome camera blinked its little red conscience. The wall clock clicked real seconds, not the generous kind. Darius set the banker's box on the table and, with a fat marker, wrote, "Bring the box across the lid as if the joke could steady his hands." Margaret laid folders like a dealer who hates luck. Tabs, clips, page numbers in the bottom right, the way order wears a uniform. Harold put his pocket watch down between the water and a stapler. Face up, second-hand carving hair-thin truth. The auditor arrived tidy as stackable trays. Neutral suite, neutral hair, legal pads squared to the table's edge. "We're on record," she said, voice set to weather. The camera blinked away. "Start with vendor 7, she added, already at a tab. Darius slid a packet under the document camera. Cool light washed the table. Purchase order, delivery slip, H. confirmation, dates, stepping themselves into sense. The auditor traced a pen cap along the lines, invoice received 5 to 3, she said. Delivery 5 to 5. Payment 5 to 10. Memo cross refers to PO. Signature legible. She turned a second sheet with the same invoice number but an off note in the font, the 9 on the bank line hooked wrong. Email footer, a half-size, shy, reissue. The lift of her eyebrows said, "Try me." Before he could answer, the door opened like a man kicking it with his shoulders. Field jacket, boots with other people's floors on them, Cobb smelled like diesel, and deadlines he'd missed on purpose. "That second's mine," he said, tossing a paper down like a glove. Overhead hit. "You slow walk, I bill again." The auditor didn't bother with eye contact. "Reissues carry new numbers." "Mr. Cobb," she said, "and they arrive from your domain, not a Gmail with your name misspelled." Cobb's grin didn't climb high enough to reach his eyes. "City jobs eat time," he said. "Everybody pads. You must be new." Darius kept his hands flat. "Who told you double pay would clear?" he asked. "Even how long you been?" "Director," Cobb answered, making director sound like hobby. "Long enough to read." Darius said, "Show chain. Bid. Change order. Sign off. If we owe, we pay." The back door squealed again. A council aide slipped in with a smile ironed for TV. He handed a folded letter to the auditor, eyes doing that slide people do when they wish their choices were invisible. "Just filing timing notes," he said to the room in general. The letterhead flashed before the camera could forget. "Office of Council Member." Down low, a line. "Expedite Vendor 7. Strategic Ally." The camera liked the word ally. It recorded without opinion. "Chain of custody," the auditor said, taking the paper with 2 fingers like it might stain. "We'll keep the original." "Of course," the aide said, his smile losing a tooth. Cobb huffed. "You people think clean paper builds a wall. Clean paper is the wall," Margaret said, eyes still on the invoice. "Stand on it or run into it." Silence took a chair. The camera kept it. "Finding," the auditor said, tapping her pen. "No duplicate payment. Irregular invoice rejected. Recommendation. Refer suspected attempt to licensing board." Cobb laughed without humor. "Do that," he said too loud. "See who stops answering calls." He left with a swagger that limped. If you watched it long enough, the door clattered. The clock clicked. The auditor flipped a new tab. "Compensation rumor," she said. "Director paid on volume." Darius slid his contract under the lens. Clause 12 sat there like a lock. No volume-based incentives. Compensation tied to independent audit score. Grievance resolution time. Staff retention. Board clawback reserved. He added a pay stub. Gross. Net. Taxes. Nothing to admire but math. "Finding," the auditor said. "Rumor unfounded. Publish Clause 12. On site, lobby board." Margaret said, "Big font. Boring where everyone can see. Boredom is underrated." The auditor said, not smiling but close. They moved through mileage logs that matched, relocation agreements signed at posted rates, apprenticeship hours without unpaid ghosts. Between the lines, the auditor's pen kept time with Harold's watch, 2 small metronomes agreeing. A knock. Big Mike reversed in a tray like a man allergic to meetings, but too stubborn to skip them. Foil lifted. Cumin fogged the neutral air. "Midwest, mild," he announced. "Hot sauce at the end of the table for sinners." Sandy followed with spoons. "Eat," she said. Numbers like company. They ate standing, paper cups of water sweating into cuffs. The auditor blew across her spoon and wrote edible on her pad. Probably a joke, probably not. For 10 minutes, The room was only metal on paper. Throat, breath, quiet, did work. Speeches never manage. The second half belonged to checklists and rectangles. The inspector arrived in her boots, and the same expression she wore for rebar and people. Clinic, she said, reading off. Hands free, sinks hot, in ache, sharps, red and out of reach. Exit arrows pointed towards sense. Panic font legible from there. She pointed to a corner and did not move. They walked the framed room, 6 Mississippi to hot. Stickers straight, arrows right. She checked boxes with the affect of rainfall. Provisional license, she said at last, pen dropping a dot like a tiny gavel. Quarterly audits, keep the boring loud. A breath left bodies. Not a cheer, relief with somewhere to sit. In the lobby framing, Jerome had set a skinny tripod and wore the grin that makes enemies itch. He panned the mock dashboard. The laminated plate below it caught light. If the screen is dark, ask us why. Multiplied in the tiny monitor. The sentence looked bigger than the foam. For the record, the auditor said into the camera, findings posted within 24 hours. Contracts above 5,000 live online by vendor and rate. Audit committee minutes at the library. The library, the inspector said, amused. Old Faith. They answer the phone, Darius said. Across the street, Ms. King's grinder sang shaving. The barber tapped his level until the bubble-minded Rosa taped a childcare grid flat. Corners didn't dare curl. Miguel taught torque till release, not before, not after. Feel the give, he murmured, hand over hand. Threads tell the truth. When the camera blinked off and the bowls were empty, the room held a small stillness. Soap, chili, and lamination. Tang an odd perfume that somehow spelled order. Harold closed the watch like ending a paragraph. Margaret squared the signed pages and slid them into the portfolio with the care of putting a child to sleep without waking whatever keeps children awake. Bored at 6, she said. 2 grievances noise. Meters at 48 by the door. Darius said, we notch base and buy another machine for 3B. Put it on the wall. The inspector said, already at the door. People forgive a posted apology faster than a hidden fix. Darius wrote on the whiteboard, noise, spill 20. 30 apologized. Base notched. White noise issued. Follow-up. Friday. He left a blank square beside it. The promise of a check. He liked leaving blanks for future truth. On his way out, he paused at the napkin wall. New squares had bloomed in jittery pens. Thank you for posting rent. Can I apprentice if I dropped out? Don't make the chili weak. My mom needs the clinic. He smoothed one with the side of his fist and let another tilt. Crooked stayed. Human stayed. The audit room lights clicked off behind them one by one, like a city block coming to term. The camera's little red eye dimmed. The wall clock kept counting anyway. Under the empty bracket where the real monitor would live, he rested his palm on blank drywall and felt through gypsum and screwhead, the thrum of systems learning themselves. A boring heartbeat, the kind that means you get another day. He touched the plate again on the way past. Brass would come later. For now, plastic and Sharpie, and a promise said out loud, if the screen is dark, ask us why. He was ready to be asked. They opened on a Tuesday, because Tuesdays don't brag. Morning slanted in from the east and laid a clean stripe across the lobby tile. Disinfectant had that thin, righteous burn. The monitor warmed itself from black to soft blue. Numbers blinked into their places, like shy kids taking assigned seats. By 9:17. The board read modest and proud. Triage. Wait. Ling Luke. Jobs placed. Ling E. Darius stood a beat too long beneath it. feeling the hum through the soles of his boots. Then forced himself into motion. Check the med fridge temp strip, glance at the decibel meter, nod to Rosa as she clipped a pulse ox on a boy's finger and made a joke about superheroes who sit still. The power failed at 9. Shabbat, not the grid, not the block, just them. The HVAC sighed and coiled itself. Lights softened to a hush no one had requested. The screen cut to black with a click that sounded like a throat deciding not to sing. For half a second, everyone held the same breath. The generator kicked on like a good dog. Exit signs pulsed awake. Med fridges kept their stubborn cold. The red path to daylight lit across the floor. The monitor stayed dark. "Keep triage moving," Rosa said, not loud, not rushed. "Manual intake, pens out, sit the dizzy." Clipboards surfaced like life preservers. Ink did what panic couldn't. Jerome jogged in from the back, camera bumping his chest. His face had the calm of a man pushing adrenaline ahead of him like a shopping cart. "Main breakers open," he said, palms up to show his empty hands. Not tripped, opened. Safety seals cut. Time window. Darius asked, between 00, 42 and 00, 47 based on HVAC logs. "I'm pulling camera." They hit the electrical room together. The smell of cooked dust and copper ghosted the air. A padlock hung obedient and useless, pick, not broken. The breaker handles sat like stubborn chins. Darius reset them with 2 fingers. Firm and clean. Light walked back across the halls in slow, considerate strides. The monitor blinked, thought about it, then came alive. A soft cheer swelled and died of its own manners. Darius reached under the bezel and touched the plate with his thumb, as if to take its pulse. "If the screen is dark, ask us why." He walked into the glass room and laid the torn red tag on the table. The librarian uncapped a pen like a ritual. Her legal pad found its lines. "Ms." King leaned forward on her elbows as if listening for a lock to speak. The union rep unfolded his arms and folded them again, training his hands to behave. "Not a surge," Darius said. "Not a municipal hiccup. This is a choice." "Police," the librarian said, already dialing. Voice finding the register that calms dispatchers and unrattles procedures. "Will bag and label. Chain of custody from your hand to mine." Margaret joined on speaker in airport noise. "City attorney gets notice now," she said. No commentary. "Do the folder log. Photo. Seals." Outside the glass, intake slid new clipboards to the front sick. A girl breathed fog on the window and drew a lopsided heart. Her mother pretended not to see. A nurse tied her hair with the elastic she always kept on her wrist, tight enough to mean business. The detective arrived at 10:03 with a walk that said he didn't audition for drama anymore. He snapped on gloves, bagged the torn tag, wrote date and initials with straight letters that knew courtrooms. He watched Jerome clone the DVR to a drive and sign the line that made evidence breathe in 2 places at once. Jerome scrubbed through footage. Midnight, East Corridor, a hoodie, cap low. A body that moved with the confidence of a man who'd never had to learn subtlety. He rode the wall like he'd failed at invisibility before, and thought trying harder would fix it. As he turned, a forearm flashed crown tattoo and a number. Black ink, done cheap and quick. "Cobb's boys," the union rep said. Not surprised, just older. The man knelt at the breaker door, worked the pick with a shrug, opened, pulled, closed, walked away like a vote no one could afford to count. No rush, no glance at the ceiling eye. That was arrogance, believing cameras belong to other people. "We keep the clinic open," Darius said. "We post the incident and the fix. No room or oxygen. At 10, Archelou. A council aide arrived in a suit that tried to look neutral and failed. He delivered a folded letter with a smile aimed at the camera, not the people. Precautionary injunction pending review of operational failure. The librarian read under the doc cam. The signature had that tremor all practiced. Signatures have when guilt rubs behind them like static. Jerome snapped a still from the footage. Then another, the aide's sunglasses in the lobby glass. His phone reflected there. An email header, ghosted across the lens. Expedite Vendor 7, the captured pixels said, strategic ally. The detective bagged the letter in a sleeve and wrote the same straight letters. We'll take a certified copy, he said, without looking at the aide. The aide's smile learned a new shape called smaller. The lobby realized it was still a lobby. The screen woke into its crawl again, and Darius typed, Incident 10. 18 main breaker tampered video, verified, emergency power engaged. Main restored 10, Archelou. Police notified. Chain of custody established. Clinic services uninterrupted. The lines scrolled in polite, relentless type. People read it with their chins lifted, as if that would steady it. His phone vibrated at 10. Archelou, a number he didn't know, and then did. Nurse at St. Mary's. Voice trained for soft catastrophes. Miss Ruby had gone quiet in her chair, like a breath that found a good place to end. The home health aide had been making tea, the room tilted a few degrees, and then righted itself, the way rooms do when they've been built for burden. Sandy appeared with a paper cup and put it in his hand, closing his fingers around it like she was finishing a prayer. Breathe first, she said. 5 in, 5 out. He obeyed. The glass room came back into focus. The librarian's pen never stopped. Ms. King rested one knuckle on the bag tag, a touch like naming. We keep the day, Darius said, though his voice sounded like he'd borrowed it from steel. We write the line, we buy time where we can. By noon, the aide had resigned with a statement that felt assembled by committee and anemia. The licensing board sent Cobb Services a notice that used the words pattern and recommendation in the same paragraph, like a lawyer pulling curtains just enough to count the bodies. The detective left with copies and the promise of phone calls that would not be returned. At 2, the inspector came back with her clipboard's square mercy. She pointed, checked, nodded. Emergency circuits behaved, she said. Incident log posted. Staff knew their jobs. She looked at Darius as if through smoke. Grief can walk beside competence, she added. The closest thing to kind her job allowed. The board reconvened at 3. Ms. King moved to adopt serialized breaker seals. 2 signatures at open and close. Log hung where fingers can smudge it. The librarian seconded without looking up. Eyes all. In the quiet room, a child slept on a book, spine up like a small animal. The HVAC breathed an old dog's contented rhythm. Light made a square and entertained dust. He left at 4 for a house with tape on its windows and a chair that wasn't a chair anymore. He unplugged the oxygen tank the way you unhook jewelry before washing hands. He folded blankets in half, then quarters, then something like ceremony. He stood in a doorway until language gave up and let the name be enough. Dusk found the plaza with people who weren't gawking. New napkins had bloomed on the wall. For Miss Ruby, Hans wrote, we will keep the lights on. The tape lifted and caught like little wings confused by air. Under the monitor, the crawl kept its small, stubborn song. He stood where he always stood and touched the plate once, the way a person checks a pulse they already know is there. It had been dark. They had asked. He had answered. The answer cost. On the way out, he stopped at the electrical room. Stainless hasps shone like a smile that meant it. Jerome stamped tag numbers into a ledger with a clack that made heads turn. The librarian called each digit as she wrote it. 19307. 19308. Ms. King nodded, like a lock deciding who counted. 2 signatures. Darius said, every open, every close. We hang the log in the lobby. Boredom in public. Boredom in public. The union rep echoed. That's policy's real name. Night came up sensible. The building settled. The UPS units whispered like small congregations at the same amen. He stood alone one last time, palm flat to the brass, cheek lit in the screen's soft glow. If the screen is dark, he said to no one and to everyone, ask me why. The room held the line and gave it back to him unbent. Outside, a bus knelt for nobody and rose anyway. A lovely, wasted kindness the city had taught itself. Inside, power found its root again, uneventful, indifferent, faithful. The boring heartbeat returned to its work. The courthouse ran cold enough to polish breath into silver. Fluorescence pressed color flat. A bailiff's shoes counted the hall like a metronome that wasn't hired for kindness. Darius sat on a bench that had learned to hold weight without comment. Harold checked the pocket watch and set it face down on his knee like a promise he'd keep regardless. Margaret paged through tabs without looking paper, moving at the speed of consequence. The librarian smoothed her skirt, pen already uncapped, eyes clear as glass. Emergency motion. The clerk called, voice clipped by repetition, City Council versus Riverside Center. They filed into a room that smelled like wood polish and old coffee. The judge took the bench with a posture that suggested gravity was a colleague. Opposing counsel rose first salt and pepper charisma, smooth vowels that could sell ice to weather. Your Honor, he began, we move for an immediate injunction. There has been a documented operations failure at a medical facility opened in haste. Public safety requires counsel. The judge said, not unkind, not patient either. The city attorney stood with the gray weight of manuals. Power was sabotaged, not failed. Emergency circuits maintained standard of care. Incident logged in real time. Chain of custody established and delivered to police. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The judge's eyes found Darius. Director Johnson, she said, testing the title and finding it serviceable. Did your board log the incident? Yes, Your Honor. He kept his hands on the table where she could see they weren't making a fist. We posted the fault and the fix on the lobby dashboard and archived a record. Show me. Jerome rolled a cart forward and cued a still onto the courtroom monitor. The dashboard, paired to bone. Incident 10. 18 main breaker tampered video verified. Emergency power engaged. Main restored 10. RCE. Police notified. Chain of custody established. Clinic services uninterrupted. Opposing counsel spread his hands in a gesture that confused magnanimity with dismissal. Tampered by whom? Exactly. The detective rose from a back pew, jacket clean, eyes carrying the kind of tired that pays taxes. Video shows a subject associated with Cobb Services. He said, identifying tattoo visible, evidence bag, case referred. A murmur in the gallery tried to stand up. The bailiff reminded it how to sit. Any policy adopted since? The judge asked. The librarian slid a single sheet forward. Breaker sealed protocol, she said. Serialized tags. Two-person verification. Open-close log posted in the lobby. Daily audit by facilities and library. Her tone made commas feel like rails. The judge read, initialed the margin, and pushed the page back like a baton in a relay. Admitted. A young woman at opposing counsel's table had been practicing stillness so hard it made noise. The council member's aide, tablet hugged to her ribs, jaw a notch too tight. When her boss leaned to whisper, she flinched microscopically and stood, hands empty. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, the way a bridge is steady. "May the court accept a supplemental exhibit?" She held out a printout that wore a city seal like perfume. The bailiff carried it up. The clerk projected the email on the screen. Subject: coordination. Body: expedite vendor 7. Strategic ally. Apply permitting pressure if needed. Time stamped. Signed. Nobody breathed for a count of 3. Harold's watch, even face down, ticked in Darius's head. "We are not here to adjudicate corruption," the judge said at last, sentence cut clean as steel. "We are here on safety," and on that point the record shows sabotage, response, and policy. She paused until silence remembered its job. Motion denied. The center remains open. Status report due in 10 days. Any further pressure from municipal offices will be docketed as contempt. One strike of the gavel found wood the way truth finds air. People stood without applause. Rooms like this collect only one kind of sound. Out in the corridor, oxygen returned, like service restored. The council member reached Darius first, aftershave and calculation arriving in the same draft. His smile practiced empathy, the way an actor rehearses an accent. "You're young," he said. "Levers move cities. You push, they push back. Let vendor 7 work. Ease off the dashboard theater. We can make your life long and comfortable." Darius watched the blue vein in the man's temple beat against good manners. "Comfortable isn't the point," he said. "Comfortable never was." The aide lingered 3 paces behind, eyes triangulating exits and cameras. Darius turned to her. "You all right?" "Don't make me answer here," she said. 8 o'clock. Bus stop across from the old shoe store. She left like running would confess something. Margaret drifted in with the kind of calm people confuse with softness. "Expect a smear," she said. "Harden your rooms. Harden your language. Clipboards at the ready." Jerome added, "If she brings a match, we don't throw it on Twitter. We put it in a bag." They returned to a building that had relearned breathing. Facilities installed stainless hasps over the electrical door. Miguel drove the bolts home and wiped them with a rag that had survived worse weeks. The librarian laid out a ledger on the check-in counter like an altar cloth. "Tag numbers," she said, out loud, in ink, in public. Jerome stamped the serialized seals. The clack was satisfying, a little theatrical good theater, the kind that teaches an audience how to behave. 19311, he read. 19312. Ms. King leaned an elbow on her kiosk, watching the rhythm take. "If a lock could smile," she said, "it'd sound like that." Evening fell honest. The plaza took on grill, smoke, and bus size. The decibel meter hovered at 49, a number that sounded like a promise kept. Darius stood under the monitor long enough to feel foolish for superstition and left anyway. The crawl did its tiny duty without him noticing. Sodium lights turned the bus stop into a stage. Gum constellations mapped the concrete. The aide Taryn sat with her tote in a white grip and a face that had stopped borrowing courage from anyone else's expression. He didn't ask for preface, and she didn't offer one. "He thinks story is a shield," she said. "He forgets story cuts both ways." "Why are you doing this?" Jerome asked, hands visible and empty. "No camera, just gravity." "I'm not saving you," she said. "I'm saving the version of me that didn't clock the job as a mirror, with my worst face in it." She slid a small USB drive across the bench. Emails, draft pressure memos, a note from Cobb's lobbyist that actually says, "Find a breaker. If I disappear from a payroll, I'll be fine. Don't quote me. Use the paper. Chain of custody. Darius said because procedure is what people grab when belief gets slippery. Taryn's mouth twitched something nearly a smile. Bag it, she said. We'll sign. The librarian produced an evidence sleeve like a magician with decent priorities. Tags read aloud. Signatures gathered under sodium fog. Taryn's handwriting looked like caution that had outlived fear. Don't lose the boring, she said, standing. It's the only armor that doesn't squeak. Come by the glass room. Darius offered. Add your name to the ledger. If you want, not yet. She touched the tote like a holster, then like a suitcase. Keep the lights on. Back inside, the board met for 10 official minutes, and the unspoken kind that matters more. A policy to accept anonymous exhibits took shape, logged, bagged, triple signed, stored at the library. The librarian wrote it by hand, neat enough to survive copy machines. She pinned a copy under glass in the lobby where fingers would smudge it by morning. Smears inbound, Margaret said, flipping her pencil. The burner sites will call us a fake clinic by breakfast. We'll post logs, Darius said. We'll feed the work, not the animals. Sandy leaned in with paper cups that steamed like rehearsal. I got chili on at 1, she said. Strategy, not charity. They laughed, because it was the right size sound for the room. Later, when the plaza remembered crickets and a far train confessed to rails, he walked the perimeter alone. The breaker door's new hasp gleamed like a tooth. Tag numbers hung neat on a clipboard where anyone could point. The UPS fans in the closet hummed a contented through line. Ordinary power made the best music. An envelope waited on the vestibule mat, slid under with a thief's courtesy. No stamp, no return. Inside, a photocopy of a forearm crown. Number, Jailhouse Inc., done with patience and bad ideas. Below it in block Sharpie, we see you. He looked up at the camera. The red eye looked back. Unblinking, unafraid. We see you too, he said, and the mic caught it like evidence. He found the plate under the screen one more time, warm from bulbs and fingerprints. The line engraved there had become a job title, a thesis, an oath with rent due. If the screen is dark, ask us why. He said it aloud, not for the room, which already knew, but for himself, a reminder that some sentences, once picked, will carve you back. Then he went to the glass room and wrote one more line in the minutes, in ink that would dry darker than it went down. Asterisk, asterisk, no crown, no shadows, paper, glass, light. They arrived at dawn with clipboards, and the kind of smiles that arrive before permission. Cheap suits, good shoes, a laminated city seal that still smelled like printer toner. The lobby hadn't found its coffee yet. Lemon Cleaner owned the air. Stainless breathed back its chill. The monitor woke on schedule and settled into its pulse. No one looked up at it. Everyone pretended mornings were normal. Administrative inspection, the lead one said, flashing the badge like a flashlight. Servers, financials, safety log. The librarian slid an intake sheet across the counter. Pen ready. Names, agency, scope, and a warrant. If you brought one, felt over hardwood. Polite, immovable, administrative, he repeated, gentler now. Testing new footing. Voluntary compliance is encouraged. Encouraged isn't chain of custody, Darius said, shoulders squared under the glow of the screen. We'll mirror what you request. Originals stay until council says otherwise. Harold set his pocket watch on the counter, face up, second hand cutting quiet. Margaret already had the city attorney on speaker, her pencil ticking the desk in an exact 5 count. A younger inspector glanced at the brass plate beneath the monitor, read the sentence there, and rubbed at a fingerprint with his thumb as if certainty might smudge. Jerome rolled in a pelican case, popped latches with brisk, church-like clicks, and lifted two portable drives sealed in antistatic sleeves. Quarterly mirror. Hashed. He handed a printout. You read the numbers. I repeat. Then we sign. The lead inspector hesitated the way a man does in a room that refuses to be rented. Proceed. Hash values unfurled like freight trains. Jerome recited. The librarian wrote each down into the evidence log. Voice steady. Date. Time. Hash. Tag. Margaret repeated. The younger inspector's pen scratched, trying to keep up with honesty. They moved to the server closet. Jerome unlocked, swung the door, and let the cool hum spill out. Drives slid into labeled foam. The librarian bagged each mirror, pressed a serialized sticker until glue took, and called the number aloud. Margaret recorded. The lead inspector's smile learned patience. Safety logs. He tried next, reaching for a lever he thought might give. Breaker incident. Any correspondence with counsel? In the glass room, Darius said, under cameras. Sit, please. They sat at a table that reflected everyone back at themselves. The librarian laid the breaker protocol on the glass like a hymn's serialized tags. Two-person verification. Open-close log in the lobby. Daily audit by facilities and library. The detective's card paperclipped to a chain of custody sleeve that held a torn red seal. Another bag lay beside it, sealed and tagged. Anonymous exhibit. The tag number was a small bright fact. The lead inspector tapped the anonymous bag with a fingernail. We can expedite if we conduct a preliminary review. Preliminaries are meals without receipts. Margaret said, not looking up. Digest at your own risk. Cute, he said. Cute is the chili. Big Mike announced from the doorway, setting a cardboard drink carrier on the table like evidence of mercy. Policy is salt. Mix right or everything tastes like regret. Dark laughter ran a quick current around the glass and died in good time. They left with mirrors and nothing else. The lobby exhaled. Outside, the sky dragged from zinc to pale steel. Inside, a nurse tucked a blanket around an old man's knees and asked if he wanted the good chair, which was the same as the other chair but closer to the window. At 10, the Attorney General's office returned a call on speaker, a voice sanded smooth by years of calming donors and thieves. We acknowledge receipt of a whistleblower packet regarding improper municipal pressure on contracting. It said, if you courier a certified copy of your data, along with chain of custody documents, we will take custody. Do not email. Courier leaves in 30. Margaret said, already flagging pages. We'll include logs, hash attestations, and the bag number for the anonymous exhibit. Understood, said the voice, then hung up with a crispness that counted. The clinic went on doing every small thing, right, that big things depend on. Rosa counted out pills into a paper cup and told a mother how to tell the difference between fever and fear. Miguel showed a teen how to feel for the click on a wiring harness. No harder, no softer. Ms. King cut a new key, while a little girl stood on tiptoe to watch the teeth get born. A local reporter tried the glass with a microphone. We've heard. The librarian turned the charter to Clause 9 and pointed, no commentary on open investigations. Audits posted on schedule. The camera filmed the sentence instead of a face. Sometimes process is better looking than people. By lunchtime, the smear hit burner site. Jittery font. A headline that bet against nuance. Fake clinic. Real danger. Propped photo of a dark screen. Crawl cut off. A rumor about expired vaccine lots. One line about a teenager playing CEO like the word could brew. Jerome pushed his chair back, hands off the keyboard. We do not go swimming in that pool. We post log, Darius said. He added a line to the dashboard. Vaccine batch numbers and temps pinned at pharmacy window. Inspection reports on file. At the pharmacy counter, he clipped the live printout to a board, clear sleeves, binder clips that clicked like they believed in something. At 2, a notice appeared on a kiosk across the plaza. Cobb Services License Review, closed pending hearing. The tape peeled once, then decided to behave. 2 men loitered near the lot corner. The hoodied one scratching at a crown and number on his wrist, like remorse. The camera above them didn't blink. "Keep your distance, Ms." King said to nobody in particular, and everybody at once. The wind brings the smell eventually. The board reconvened at 3. The glass room had the day's heat in it. The AC grumbled, lost, then remembered work. The librarian pinned a fresh napkin to the lobby wall's shaky pencil. "We saw you keep the screen lit, stuck it deliberately crooked. Human outrank tidy. Courier confirmed arrival in 40 minutes. Margaret reported, receipt to follow. Licensing posted Cobb. The union rep said, expect him to make noise with his mouth since his trucks can't. Noise we can handle, Jerome said, gesturing to the decibel meter by the door. It's the quiet that worries me. At 4:07, a text hit Margaret's phone, a photo of a rubber stamp on a receipt, a signature that had practiced its letters a long time, a time code that looked like a promise. She printed it and taped it under glass in the lobby beside the napkin wall. People stopped to look. They didn't cheer. They nodded like a bolt had found its thread. At 5, the lead inspector reappeared carrying a stapled letter from the city's legal office. Clarification, he said, placing it on the counter with 2 fingers. This morning's request was just that, a request. We appreciate your commitment to due process. Due process appreciates itself, the librarian said, signing to acknowledge receipt and filing the letter under a tab labeled Courtesy and Comedy. Evening hauled a decent breeze through the corridor. A barber taped a photo of a kid's first fade next to the napkins because victories need walls. A mother left with antibiotics, and the posture of someone who would sleep, maybe for the first time in a week. The reporter filmed the dashboard again, quieter now, as if the camera had learned manners. Dusk put a coin of light on Taryn's cheek as she stood across the street and didn't cross. She tapped a cigarette out, then shoved it back into the pack like a decision. You'll get a letter, she called, voice crossing traffic. Fine, from an account that thinks it's private. He's not wrong enough. We'll bag it, Darius said, and she nodded like that was the right kind of threat. Night fell in familiar notes, crickets warming up, a train, a town away confessing its timetable, UPS units, humming a small choir in the closet. Jerome taped the day's decibel strip to the whiteboard. 51, 50, 49. A plateau that meant neighbors slept. Exciting graph, Sandy said, setting down a tray. We should charge admission. Bundle it with chili, Big Mike said, following with bowls. People will come for the cumin and stay for the compliance. They ate standing, then sitting on milk crates when standing got boring. People told today's 5-minute story. 5 ways. The sprinkler heads along the east corridor wore faint halos, where reflection made them look like pewter medals. The air held a clean, scorched note that means something tried and didn't get to finish. Darius walked the perimeter at close. The breaker door's stainless hasp shone like a new tooth in an old jaw. He tugged it once, not because he doubted steel, but because ritual turns fear into maintenance. The log beside it bore 2 fresh signatures and a tag number that would survive a bad memory. In the lobby, the monitor smoothed into its late shift. The crawl threw up its quiet miracles. AG receipt logged. Mirrors delivered. clinic steady. The brass plate below it felt warmer than metal should. He pressed one knuckle to the sentence engraved there and let the day find its edge. Outside, a car idled too long and then left. Inside, paper held, glass held, light held. The ordinary hum came back. Not speech, not threat, just power. Finding its root and staying modest about it. He locked the door, checked the plate again with a fingertip like a signature, and left the building to practice breathing without him. Storm heat sat on the city like a hand. Asphalt sweated. Radios crackled with static that sounded like bad omens trying to learn English. Inside the center, Lemon and Steel shared the morning air. The monitor woke as if nothing in the world could surprise it. Triage wet. Ling Wu. Jobs placed. Ling Yi. The brass plate beneath the screen held a faint thumbprint, a smear that felt like a signature more than a flaw. Across town, the licensing boardroom smelled of steamed carpet and coffee that had argued with its filter. Fluorescents hummed. Name placards marched along a dais. Margaret set her portfolio down as if it were a case, not a bag. The librarian hugged a gray archival box to her ribs. Jerome rolled a case with drives, labeled like grave markers. Darius took the aisle seat, eyes on a clock that clicked real seconds. Cobb sat 2 rows back in a jacket that lied about his boots. His jaw worked like it had an old fight to finish. Beside him, his lawyer wore a smile that had closed mortgages. The chair rapped once. Enough. License review vendor 7, she said. Irregular invoices, attempted duplicate billing, and improper contact with a council office. Her gaze skimmed the crowd and stopped on the stack of documents like a hawk, considering small animals. Proceed, counsel sighed, like letting a play begin. Margaret went first, the way a good story does with what's dull and therefore true. Bid sheet, change order, payment ladder. Dates anyone could check if they still believed in calendars. The librarian slid the duplicate invoice under the doc cam. Jerome circled font, tells with a red pencil that squeaked. The monitor on the wall showed the hooked 9 in the bank line, the footer's half-size lie, the email domain that missed one letter like a drunk, clerical error. Cobb's attorney offered, voice warm enough to sell a stove in July. My client works fast while bureaucracy naps. Fast isn't 2 numbers for one invoice. The chair said, dry as a judge's tea. Who cut the breakers? Asked a board member, eyes not leaving Cobb's face. What breakers? Cobb said, amused in the way of men who think paper can't find teeth. Jerome qued midnight video. A hoodie at the east corridor, the easy shrug of a practiced hand at a lock. The door's slow mouth. The handles pulled down like switches in a bad film. The camera didn't blink. A crown tattoo flashed when a sleeve rode up. The room didn't gasp so much as inhale in unison. Cobb laughed once, a bark that couldn't decide if it belonged outside. You people and your movies. Taryn stood from the aisle, hair in the practical bun of someone done apologizing. She held a tablet like a shield made of fax. Submitted correspondence. She said, loud enough for microphones but not for drama. Expedite. Strategic ally. Find a breaker? From a council office to vendor 7, she said the phrases like pushing a boat off a shore. Her eyes didn't seek Darius, but she didn't avoid him. The chair lifted a stamped receipt from a folder, the Attorney General's office seal crisp, time like a nail, chain of custody intact. She said, copies received, originals preserved. Cobb stood halfway, sat. His lawyer touched his sleeve and found only cloth. The chair leaned toward her mic. Recommendation revocation, she began. Sirens cut her off. Not in the room. In the center high, insistent, the tone that makes bodies obey before minds catch up. Darius was already moving. Margaret had the portfolio. The librarian had the box. Jerome took the drives. They hit the hallway in a ragged run that echoed tile into applause. The center had already remembered its job, doors unlatched. Red floor lights drew lines like instructions on how to live. The generator coughed into dignity. The lobby screen blinked once, twice, then caught itself and began talking. Alarm 10, 42. Fire panel zone 3. Evacuate East Corridor. Fire department en route. A sweet, wrong scent threaded the air, chemical optimism trying to pass as cleaning fluid. Rosa pivoted like a metronome. Walk. Don't run. If you feel dizzy, sit. If you can help someone, you do. Clipboards became umbrellas against panic. A kid stared at the overhead sprinklers like they were rare birds. One blinked, glass beads shattering with a delicate ping. A sheet of water punched flat, a fresh flame trying to audition. Jerome split to the camera console. A hoodie at the service door again. Some get, same plastic can glint. The lighter's flare got its few frames of fame. The sprinkler answered with the only opinion that matters, temperature. The figure slipped, grabbed a hinge, left prints where water had turned dust to paste. Kill power to East Corridor only, Darius called. Facilities hit the sub-panel like piano players who know the song. The librarian checked the breaker seals through the glass. Stainless hasps. Tags unbroken. Numbers matching the log that hung in the lobby. Pin ink still young. Engine 2. Rolling 2 minutes. The radio said, calm as a library. Ms. King gathered toddlers like keys, one hand for each. Big Mike arrived with towels as if dignity could be patted dry. The decibel meter by the door watched the room at 51, then 49, then a humane 47 as people's breath remembered itself. Outside, Cobb slouched at the crowd's edge, a tourist at his own mess, grin thin. The sirens painted him red, blue, red. His smile flickered like bad neon and came back wrong. Firefighters moved past like sentences that don't waste words. A tech knelt at the sill, sniffed, nodded. Accelerant, he said, which is a fancy way to name cheating. Tape unfurled. Gloves lifted evidence. Jerome handed off a thumb drive like communion. Chain of custody, he said. Camera feed. Time stamps. Tag numbers. Sharpie squeaked labels into existence that might one day sit under glass. The screen never went fully black. It spoke in emergency grammar. Sprinklers engaged 10. Sushasan. Fire contained 10. Sushutsi. All occupants accounted for. People read with their chins lifted as if that steadied the letters. By noon, the boardroom had damp cuffs and a patience that had decided to survive. The chair didn't need to rap twice. Vendor 7, she said, voice crackled dry. Temporary suspension becomes permanent revocation. Referral to the district attorney. Council communications forwarded to the Attorney General. We reconvene in 30 days for status. Cobb stood too fast, swallowed so hard his neck confessed it. I built half this town, he said. You'll miss me when the lights. We'll miss invoices that add, the chair said, and we prefer water to fire. She lifted the stamped receipt again and tapped it once. A tiny gavel. A bailiff didn't touch Cobb. He didn't need to. The detective from the tampered seal stood in the aisle and held out a rectangle that wasn't a card. Bring counsel, he said, and every copy you told yourself not to keep. Cobb smiled like he was being filmed. Maybe he was. He looked for the council member and found only absence, a chair that had learned to be empty. The city exhaled around the center as if a belt had been loosened one notch. The east corridor dripped like a rain delay in a ballpark. Fans muttered themselves useful. Ms. King handed out spare socks to people who'd walked through puddles. Rosa went back to triage with a voice that could talk pain down off a ledge. Terrence stopped at the threshold without crossing. She stared at the brass plate beneath the monitor as if it might blink. He always believed fire admired him, she said, almost to herself. Turns out it just likes work. Paper's patient, Darius said. Water's literal. She smiled and didn't let it touch her eyes. You're going to be tired for a long time. I already was, he said. By late afternoon, towels lay folded on milk crates like surrenders. The incident report hung under glass where fingers had already smudged it into community. The monitor returned to ordinary miracles. Triage wait. Ling C. Jobs placed. Ling R. The crawl added a line. Fire contained. Damaged tiles replaced tomorrow. Clinic open. Dusk shook a long shadow from the breaker door. The stainless hasp wore a new scratch where a pry bar had decided to learn respect. Darius pressed his palm to it and let cold say what words would only make dramatic. Inside the corridor, new water ran to drains that did exactly what humble things do when called. They ate on crates because chairs were for people waiting. Big Mike called it firehouse chili and went easy on the heat for once. Laughter made room for relief. Tears got a stool in the corner, and no one asked them to leave. Someone taped a cookie and a napkin to the wall with a scrawl. For those who kept it wet, when the plaza emptied and the fans learned quiet, Darius stood under the screen and touched the plate with one knuckle. The metal felt cool again, not because nothing had happened, but because everything had held. Outside, thunder flirted and moved on. Inside, the building found its old hum, the kind that lives between threat and speech. The sentence cut the light like a seam. If the screen is dark, ask us why. Tonight, it never got a chance. They pulled the plastic at dawn, one long whisper, like peeling a scab that decided to heal. The east corridor breathed again. New tiles bright with the sheen of things that haven't learned disappointment. Lemon cleaner met damp gypsum. A box fan clicked itself off and coasted, proud of small work done well. Harold set his pocket watch on the check-in counter. Glass up. Second-hand patient. Time had stopped surprising them. It still counted. The monitor yawned awake. Triage wait. Ling San. Jobs placed. Ling E. Asterisk, asterisk. The brass plate below it kept a thumbprint, like a signed receipt. Darius left it there. Proof beats polish. Board at 8. The librarian said, stacking minutes that already smelled like archive. Budget at 9. Grievances at noon. Chili at 1, Sandy added, rolling a metal cart that squeaked the way honest wheels do. Strategy, Ms. King said from her kiosk, flipping the grill with a small parade of keys. Never waste your best weapon. The glass room filled on time. Chairs scraped. Bench unzapft. Coffee went from bad to necessary. The librarian read in a voice that could pace a pulse. Margaret initialed with a pencil that left neat constellations of graphite on the paper. The union rep pushed his glasses up and cleared his throat once. A signal that meant math. Holiday week. He said, apprentices still eat. Can we front stipends? We call it retention. Margaret said, donors like the word, and the kids like the money. Motion, the librarian said, already writing it down. Aye, the room answered, and bureaucracy. Blessed made mercy official. Any new napkins? Darius asked when silence tried to get shy. The librarian slid a purple gel-penned square across the table. Asterisk. My grandma said, "Thank you for the pill talk," asterisk. A pin through the corner. She hung it slightly crooked in the lobby, because the tilt made it human. Atneen. Budget. Columns. Decimals. The kind of math that heats rooms in January and cools them in July. Margaret drew boxes around lines labeled Times Ductwork. Nuisance fixe. Quiet hours. Heat's a bully, she said. Grants don't fund ductwork. We need a line called boring. And mass, call it resilience, Harold said, tapping the watch once. Grant makers love to feel noble about the mundane. Sandy stuck her head in. Resilience is chili with less cumin, she said. Fine, we'll sell it. An hour later, a courier in a windbreaker taped a notice to the front glass and took a picture of his own tape measure for proof. Asterisk, asterisk, City Council, special session, 7 p.m. No agenda posted. The letters had the nervous hands of a last-minute print job. Taryn texted a grainy draft resolution anyway. The screenshot looked like evidence and regret. Restructure oversight. Replace director. Pose operations pending. Compliance review. They prefer midnight to daylight, Margaret said, flipping the page and marking it. Asterisk, asterisk, anticipated. Asterisk, asterisk. Jerome wheeled in a squat black box with a cord like a leash and slapped a label on it. Asterisk, asterisk, UPS 4. Lobby, asterisk, asterisk, then crouched to plug it into a strip he'd named with masking tape. If noise knocks, we can keep talking, he said. Literally. At noon, grievances. Apartment 3B had a complaint and a point. A delivery truck had coughed bass at 12:17 a.m. The decibel meter printed a strip like an EKG spikes measurable. Apology due. Darius signed 2 cheap white noise machines out of the supply cage and wrote asterisk asterisk delivered. Asterisk asterisk next to the line on the board with a hand that no longer shook. Avendor argued rent. The librarian read the schedule the way you read weather. Not cruel, not négociable. Prepared. The barber asked about mirrors and truth. Darius adjusted the bracket 1 notch. The bubble found the middle and stayed. By late afternoon, the east tiles had gone from bright to normal. The monitor's crawl added diction without fanfare. Asterisk, asterisk, licensing board. Vendor 7 revoked. AG review pending. Quiet hours, elf pay. M. 7 AD blank. M. Meter live. Eat before politics, Big Mike said, appearing with a hotel pan that sweated cumin and apology. They ate at the high table that still remembered being plywood. 10 minute spoons. Breath. A bus sigh outside at the curb like it had decided to kneel for dignity. They walked to City Hall at 6:30 because walking sets a mood. The building had the tired pride of a courthouse that used to be a post office. Tiled too eco-friendly, air too cold to admit feelings. Reporters lined the back wall. Cables snake. Red tally lights blinked like small lies. The council member sat center. Yafset. Tie shaved to perfection. He had learned to look at the middle distance like it was the public. Taryn took a seat 2 rows back, toed at her feet, eyes awake the way you get after you choose. Resolution, the chair said, voice making a lie out of neutrality. Restructure oversight. Replace director. Pose operation pending review. Committee report. A colleague asked, out of habit or decency? No, the chair said, and the silence that followed had a shape. Opposing counsel stood with the relaxed menace of a man who had consumed rooms for years and digested them. Youth and ambition are not qualifications. He began. Public safety. We posted our faults, Darius said. Standing before the sentence could congeal. He didn't clear his throat. The room needed one kind of voice tonight. We posted our fixes. We posted the time firefighters arrived, and the names of the people who counted heads. We posted our rent schedule, our wages, our audits. We will not wear crowns. We will not take them either. You think transparency is immunity, the council member said. He smiled without investing in the smile. It's just nudity. It's a mirror, Darius said, calm as a meter. You should try standing in front of it while the lights are on. Taryn stood. Her voice didn't shake. It had other work. The Attorney General has our office's emails, she said. Pressure on permitting to benefit a vendor. Find a breaker. If you pass this tonight, you pass an alibi. No one clapped because rooms like this only know two sounds. Gavel and hum. The hum shifted, reporters leaning in, aides checking phones. A council member finding his conscience heavy in the wrong pocket. The chair called the vote. Hands lifted. The clerk counted. Hesitation learned its jaw and bit. 4 in favor, she said. 4 opposed. The chair looked at the gavel like it might grow advice. It didn't. Motion fails, she said, and the color returned to the room in small degrees, like dawn deciding in the hallway. Microphones tried for blood and got clause numbers under glass. The librarian held up the charter like a hymn book and pointed at asterisk audits posted on schedule. Asterisk until the cameras blinked. They walked back in a thinner heat. Windows lit up into little stages, someone's kitchen, someone's living room, a dog deciding it had an opinion. At the corner, the bus knelt with no one to board, and rose again as if practicing kindness. The center waited, glowing the way. Buildings glow when they've learned how. The monitor showed asterisk jobs placed. 02. Clinic. Steady. Asterisk. A kid pressed both hands to the glass and left constellations. His mother read the crawl and let a breath out she'd kept since noon. Pick your sentence, Harold said, closing the watch with a click that sounded like mercy. Life carves it into brass, either way. Darius touched the plate. Metal remembered heat. It stayed cool. They ate what was left of dinner at the high table, not a feast sandwiches that kept bread honest. Someone taped a sugar cookie to the napkin wall and wrote for Ruby in blue. People who didn't know her said the name anyway, quietly, because names keep buildings from turning back into walls. Jerome did his perimeter like a farmer checks fence. UPS lights blinking small constellations. Breaker door hasp flush. Tag numbers matching the lobby log. Ms. King counted cash twice, distrusted it, and locked it with a key that had names scratched into its brass. The barber texted a graduation photo. His dad cried, pretended it was the Clippers. The glass room held the day's smudges like a palimpsest hands, pointing without touching, decisions made and unmade. The present written over the old future in dry erase and stubbornness. The decibel strip printed a steady line that would bore anyone not trying to sleep. Darius stood alone in the lobby when the night finally agreed to be quiet. The screen breathed on his cheekbones. Outside, a train confessed to tracks somewhere far enough to be comforting. Inside, power found the roots it had found yesterday and would choose tomorrow. If allowed, he traced the letters once, twice, like practicing a signature he'd be stuck with. If the screen is dark, ask us why. A moth tapped the glass as if clocking in late. The building answered with a low hum that wasn't speech or threat, just promise the long light of a place that intends to keep telling the truth. In the end, this story isn't about heroes with capes. It's about ordinary people choosing steady courage over comfortable silence. It reminds us that fairness is rarely a thunderclap. It's a series of small, boring, faithful acts done in the open. When systems fail us or tilt the table, we can still keep our dignity by telling the truth plainly, writing down the rule, and inviting others to look with us. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and true gold doesn't fear the fire. We don't have to fight loud to fight well. We can post our receipts, name what hurts, and keep the door open for the neighbor who needs in. For those living with old griefs, hard marriages, or labels that never fit, remember, you are not the worst thing that happened to you. Step out of the toxic quiet, set a boundary, ask for help, and keep walking. Justice often comes for the long haul, and you reap what you sow. Patience, transparency, and self-respect grow into trust. And when we walk a mile in someone's shoes, we see how diversity isn't noise. It's the harmony that keeps a community in tune. I'd love to hear your take. What moment rang true for you? Where have you seen quiet honesty change the temperature of a room? Share your story in the comments. Or pass this video to someone who might need it today. If this resonated, tap like to help others find it, and subscribe so you won't miss the next hard human tale we unpack together. Wishing you calm after the storm, a steady light on your next step, and the kind of peace that comes from telling the truth and being met with grace.